Hello and welcome to the Gooners podcast. My name is Mike Herz, your host, and today we are going to be previewing the Arsenal versus Villarreal Europa League final or Europa League semi-final. I did the same mistake last night.
Pronunciation was on point.
On point. We already have Mikey in the chat, and this is exactly why he turned in. All he wanted to do is hear me say Arteta and Villarreal. That's it. He's gonna be fucking off any second now. Owen, how are we doing, mate?
I'm good. I apologize for the echo. As I was saying to you before the podcast, I'm currently moving home, and luckily my internet connection in my old house is still going while I have the keys. So it's a bit of an emergency location, but it's going to have to do. And I was saying to you, I'm going to have to talk like Clive from the Arsenal Vision podcast and talk really quiet. Yeah, so.
It's okay. It fits you. It's very soothing, actually. You know, this with everything that's going on with the takeover. You know, the stress is really high right now. So maybe we
fuck the takeover.
Nice, a calm, soothing voice. Jared, back at it again, man. Thanks for dropping by. I pulled you in last minute. I couldn't not make a Gooner Crack reunion happen on this podcast, so I figured I got to get my good friend Jared on. How are you doing, brother?
Doing good. Thanks for having me. I always love getting on and chatting with you. And for me and Owen, it's been a little bit, so nice to be on with both you guys again.
Right on. So, Owen, you have had the pleasure of quitting Twitter, unlike us Twitterholics that can't get away from it. So you haven't been around the meltdown that's currently happening on the social media platforms. So, I'm not sure if you've heard, but there might be a takeover coming on. Shocker. So before we move on to the actual game, I want to get some of your thoughts and just recap kind of where you're at, because we haven't been able to hear from you on the socials. So how are you feeling about the whole prospect of the takeover?
I'm going to try and talk quite low because I know the echo is probably going to bother people. So let me know if I'm either too loud or too quiet. No, well, look, as you said, this has been my first pod on since really the whole Super League fiasco came out. And to be honest, I think the relationship with the Cronkies have been sort of hanging on a thin thread for a long, long time. And we heard Josh Kroenke say post Super League that he wanted to rebuild trust with the fans. And to be perfectly honest with you, I don't think trust was ever established with the Cronkies. I think the Cronkies, as owners, have always done literally the bare minimum to get themselves by and get the fans off their back temporarily. So when you look at, for example, transfers throughout their tenure, for example, Thomas Partey and Gabriel coming in were massive positives, but I do think that we needed more investment in that window, and we didn't see it. So once again, them just doing the bare minimum. In terms of the potential overtake from Daniel Ike, I think his name is it Eck or Ike. I'm all for it, and look, people are questioning how he has the financial pulling power to make a move like this. You know, you can look up his net worth, but look, with loans, with those sort of multi-billionaires, there's loans available. Put it like this: I would put it down to the fact that if he is seriously getting ready to table a sort of acceptable offer of around that 2 million mark that it is valued at, then obviously there is maybe the potential for the Cronkies to sell up. When you look at the Cronkies, they bought Arsenal for approximately just over £1 billion, and it's now valued at somewhere in the region. I think Forbes had it around 2 billion. So that's quite a hefty profit on KSE's part. With the losses of the pandemic, I think Arsenal are tipped to lose around 250 million this year alone. I think as well, when you look at the Super League, that I honestly think that was their end game. I think that's what the Cronkies took over Arsenal for, was that they were going to have that financial safety net of a massive regular income from a European Super League. And now that has been pulled out from under their feet, and with how much of a fan reaction there was to that, the negative reaction, I don't see that tabling any time again soon. So I think I described it it was the Gooner Talk WhatsApp chat as this could be a perfect storm in terms of a time to sell. You have financial losses from a company who don't like losing money. You have massive amount of fan pressure. You have a suitable buyer with the backing of 3 club legends. So in terms of whether it's likely to happen or not, it's yet to be seen. But for me, the possibility of this coming to fruition is a lot more likely than people are giving it credit for.
Yeah, I give it roughly 0% of it becoming a reality too. But as optimistic I am in all things Arsenal, I'm going to be pessimistic when it comes to the sales of Arsenal Football Club, because I just don't see it happening just based on the trajectory and the history of the Cronkies. So it might be, man. You never know.
I'm sorry to jump in again, but I think Mike Feinberg doesn't do many extremely intelligent things, but one extremely intelligent, very, very rarely, but Mike did put that video out, and there was a couple of points about the sort of possible tax reform that we could see in the States under the new presidency, and how that could implement or impact the KSE financially. And to be honest with you, like I said, I understand that the Cronkies have come out and says that they have no intent to sell, but look, nobody has any intent to sell until they do. That's the way that's the way business works. Like, where would it put KSE? What advantage would it be to KSE to come out now and say, look, the club's for sale? You know what I mean? They just cut your price in half of what you were expecting to get for your club. You always get more money for something that other people think that you want to keep hold of. So for me, when you talk about the possibility of selling and it being 0, I would disagree with that. Whether David Icke is the actual going to be the guy who ends up with the ownership of the club is another conversation totally. But that's another thing as well. I think that when you have one person gaining interest and you have one person who's preparing to table bids, well, that piques other people's interest. People start thinking, well, Jesus, maybe there is a chance to negotiate here, and we could see other bidders coming to the table as well. So if anything, I think it's positive. I definitely don't think that this is a negative in any way.
So taking on what Owen said right there, Jared, I'm a little paranoid about this whole situation, because I kind of view this situation as the devil you know versus the devil you don't know. And so Stan Kroenke, even though he's fairly unpopular in the sense that the man doesn't open his mouth, doesn't communicate with the fans, I look at him like a guy that's willing to make changes. He's hired people, made mistakes. Directors have come and gone. Ever since he took full, ownership, custodiancy over Arsenal, I think that's when, if I am correct, if I remember correctly, the year he took over is when Arsene Wenger ended up leaving Arsenal. Now, coincidence, or maybe it was decision by him / Josh, I don't know. But how are you feeling with the potential of new ownership, Jared? Because I have a theory, and that theory is when a billionaire, the way you can tell a billionaire or a politician is lying is that their mouths are moving. So when he comes out and gives statements like, I want to build the bridge, I want to relate to fans, I want to be there, and plus the legends that he has recruited for a PR standpoint, it makes me even more paranoid. But Jared, what are your feelings towards potential new ownership?
So I'm with you in that I think it's still pretty unlikely. I know Owen kind of raised the point that the value of the club has gone up. They could potentially see $2 billion for it when they've only got $1 billion in, which is a good point. I would say the counter to that is, in the short time they've owned the team, their investment's doubled in value. Why would they sell it now? It's always going to continue to grow. And that's probably, I think, one thing that they'll consider. That being said, there's always a number out there that it would just not make sense for them to turn down. The question is whether or not someone would really bring that forward. If you want to have an optimistic view and have, a positive light on it, I would say the one complaint Arsenal fans have always had with KSE, obviously, is that they're business people. They look at it as an investment. They don't have any sentimental sort of value to the club, to them anyway. So when it comes to somebody making an offer, what would work to the benefit of new ownership is that they don't have that sentimental attachment and that they are just businessmen, kind of the same thing. And that if the right number comes in, whatever that number is for them, they would probably be willing to cut ties. As far as is Eck raising the equity, I know that gets brought up a lot, and people say, the club will cost a couple billion. He's only worth $3 billion. Owen kind of pointed this out earlier. These things aren't done by him pulling out his checkbook and writing a personal check for, whatever the cost is. Spotify, I believe, right about tripled in value over the last 18 months. It's worth tens of billions of dollars. So the equity he has in that, would enable him to finance a loan. And I don't think him financing this is a factor at all. I think whatever amount it would cost to pay or cost for Arsenal, he could swing that if it was a number he was willing to do. But again, the Kroenkes have said they don't want to sell, and they have a history of not selling. So I'd be really surprised to see it go through. But as far as new ownership in Eck, I'm not sure how long his interview was this morning on CNBC. I saw like a 90-second little snippet on Twitter. And, if you're an Arsenal fan who wants new ownership, he does say all the things you would want to hear. He talks about the culture of the club, the history, the importance of the fans and all of that. So I understand completely why people would be excited for it. And to be perfectly honest, I would just on the little bit I know about him, I would probably prefer his ownership to KSE. But I think it's important that fans don't look at it as if KSE doesn't sell, that Arsenal can't succeed. We've still actually made a lot of good moves over the last year. This summer, we're going to be as financially flexible as we've been probably in the last 5 years. And our team's not that far away from being a top 4 side. So I think that's going to be the big hurdle is if no sale goes through, not having the fan base collapse and think we have no chance of success, because I don't think that's going to be the case.
See, just to follow on from that. So even though I mentioned that 2 billion mark, that's not where I see that sort of the price tag in. I think that if it is to be sold, you're probably talking in the region of anywhere between 3 to 4 billion. I think that probably turns KSE's heads. As I mentioned before, their debt with the Ram Stadium, the tax reforms, fan pressure, and the losses coming from Arsenal of late. I think that financially, then that move probably does make sense for KSE. At the end of the day, they're a franchise. They're a sporting franchise. They own many sporting teams, and we're just another asset to them. So when an asset becomes when it becomes sort of profitable, it only makes sense for them to move us on. So yeah, and look, whether KSE remain here or not, it's still, there's a lot of problems still on the pitch as well. And I suppose another question that I'd throw over to you, Mike, is that something we often see with new owners is a change of management, and Mikel Arteta seems to be sitting quite comfortably with the backing of the current ownership. Do you see maybe someone like a Daniel Ike coming in and maybe trying to stir the pot up and get someone with a little more pedigree in?
That would be
hypothetical, obviously.
Hypothetically, yes. That would be incredibly ballsy if he actually did try to do that. But we often talk about what current managers could come in and just be better than Arteta currently under the, granted, they could be sold hey, we're going to invest in the team. We're going to give you what you want. And then you start to think about the managers that are available right now. And, Nagelsmann, Rose, other top German managers already signed up to other teams going into next season. And then you go back and you think Allegri, that's like the one manager that you keep on hearing come over. So I'm not massive on Allegri myself. He kind of played a style of football in Juventus where it wasn't exactly the most attacking and beautiful football. Actually, I'll go out on a limb and say Conte has a little bit more flair to his game, at least from my personal perspective. But I don't see it happening personally. And just to piggyback on your guys' Aston Max comment about selling, making profit, and you as well, and was the one thing that stood out for me on that fan forum was when questioned about the Super League. Joss was very calculated and very smart in the manner in which he answered, and he didn't say no more Super League. He said, based on the way the Super League is presented right now, no. So in my head, there's still value to be squeezed out of Arsenal. If he just holds out 2-3 more years, if this Super League pops up again, just with a little bit more meritocracy in it. There you go. English hard. If there's a little bit more merit on board, potentially some fans would be a little bit more comfortable with the idea, even though, you know, the concept of a Super League is very off-putting. I still think there's a little bit more value, and I still don't think this whole Super League thing is dead and gone.
So see with that as well, because even though I haven't been on with you as well, and I'm sorry to be jumping back into maybe last week's news, but during those podcasts, Mike, and I know you were saying that you were sort of doing your homework a little bit with more local fans and trying to understand their point, but you were somebody that was maybe a little more open to the thought of a Super League. Why was that?
And I got battered.
Yeah. No. It's funny because like I'm not asking you to try and argue with you over it. It's just interesting to me as to someone who has been an Arsenal fan for such a long time, and you would have a very deep understanding of the values of the club. Why you would maybe be more open than most to that European Super League?
So first, in my opinion, I didn't see it, or I don't see it impacting the league as much as some other fans. Some other fans think it will destroy every single league. I looked at it like if we have 6 Premier League teams that are playing in the ESL, they all get a huge cash injection. So all 6 teams improve their squads. Next time Sky Sports comes to the league and says, hey, we want to renew these TV contracts, now, based on those 6 teams having bigger star power and better wages, they can then in return ask Sky, hey, we want more money for you to televise our league, which means, in theory, based on how the contracts work and the league distributes all the money and the TV revenue, all the other teams would stand to gain. So if the Sky Sport contract goes up 20%, everybody down the league other than the 6 teams would get a 20% increase. Now, where I'm at is partly I understand the merit thing, very, very important, and I totally get that, and I totally understand that the thought of the process that some people thinking like, or it not thinking, sorry, it is what it is. If there's no relegation, it's not a fair competition. I totally understand that. This is where my point of view comes in. I'm frustrated by UEFA and the alleged FIFA fair play rules, because I'm sitting here as an Arsenal fan and I'm watching Arsenal play the game of transfers by the rules. I'm seeing them be classy. I'm seeing them doing things the right way. All while Chelsea and City are doing literally whatever the fuck they want. And when City got caught, they got slapped on the wrist. And that is it. So under current circumstances and fair play, I don't view the league or world football for that matter. The bigger issue here is money, right? Super agents, all this thing that's going on. I don't look at it like we're playing on an even playing field. So my thought process to that was like, hey, next time City dominate us, just dominate the shit out of us. Just remember that they could spend whatever amount of money they want and their bench is better than our starters. To me, that's not FIFA fair play. To me, that's not being fair. So I think a lot of my motivation on that and a lot of the whole fact that I'm like, maybe I'm okay with this Super League, it's because I'm like, we're finally going to get some money in that could potentially improve our squad. So that's kind of where I was coming from. And obviously, I spoke about this in the last podcast. I did not only speak to you, Mikey, Andy, a lot of people, but I also spoke to a lot of locals. And, they kind of ran me down the history of the league and everything. And, it gave me some broader perspective than that I didn't have a few weeks ago. So, yeah, that's where my initial reaction to the Super League was. I just kind of looked at it like we played it the right way this whole time. Because we played it the right way, and my thought process of the whole merit of being there was historically the last 15, 20 years, Arsenal is a decorated club. They're not a small club by any measure. It's an historical club with historical achievements. Literally any of those 12 teams that you could see in that competition, other than Spurs, and I'm not even just taking the piss at them to take the piss at them for the sake of it, right? Other than Spurs, all of those teams are heavily decorated teams with a massive global following, and they have the massive global following because they've won championships. So that's kind of where I understood the merit coming from. But that's very personal. I'm horrible at reading the chat when I'm speaking, so I could only assume Drago and Aston Mac are letting me have it right now. So that will be the last time I'm talking about the Super League before I dig that ditch even deeper. Gentlemen, are you ready to talk about the Villarreal game?
We are, yes.
Let's do it.
All right. Owen, Villarreal under Unai Emery.
Wait there. Your Super League point was good, but it was still wrong.
No,
I'm just joking.
Obviously.
Well, American
I
Arsenal fans just don't get it.
Yeah, as I jokingly said, I'm a stupid yank. What do I know, really? A couple of old faces. Francis Coquelin coming back to us, of course. Danny Parejo is a Spanish midfielder that's been around the league forever. He went from Valencia to Villarreal, and guy's a baller, if I do say so myself. So I think that midfield is going to be a big battleground for us. But one thing that is on my mind, Owen, is Samuel Chukwueze and his potential battle with Granit Xhaka, who seems to be, as things stand, our left back. So after seeing the Everton game, after seeing how Xhaka got kind of exposed by Richarlison, are you at all concerned with this, with having Xhaka have to defend a pacey winger?
Yeah, and there's a couple of comments about my echo as well. Again, go back to the start of the podcast. I apologized. Yeah, I am, and to be honest with you, it was a point that I brought up when he originally started filling in at left back. I think firstly against Sheffield United, and then against Slavia Prague. I think when there's a game tailored to Granit Xhaka playing in that position, he's quite competent there, and I almost called it it's very American of me to say, but a quarterback role where he didn't have many defensive responsibilities, but he was just given the freedom to sort of ping balls wherever he wanted. But let's just get one thing straight. Granit Xhaka, while he's a very competent footballer, he's not a left back. He doesn't have the positional awareness to play there, and he doesn't have the natural attributes to play there. He doesn't have the speed. He's quite rash in a tackle. So for me, I wouldn't be playing him there, not only because I don't think that he's fully competent to handle the responsibility of playing there, but because I think he's such a big miss for us in the centre of the park. People often criticise him about passing backwards and sideways, but I think if you look up his statistics this season, he's arguably one of our most progressive players, especially when you have Nicola Pepe playing on that left wing. For some reason, he always seems to find space for him. But look, that left back role, Kieran Tierney coming back possibly, but for me, this game's coming a bit too soon for him. So I'm going to throw this here out there, okay? And I haven't heard many people suggest this one, but I would be maybe looking to play Gabriel in left back. I actually wrote a piece about Gabriel on the Gooner Talk website when he was initially signed, and throughout his entire youth career, right up until I think even when he made his professional debut, if I can remember correctly, he played as a left back. That was his position until maybe he physically matured and maybe lost a tad of speed, or he was just much more competent in the centre half position. So Gabriel is somebody there that I think is very good. I also maybe will cover it a wee bit more when we get into our entire lineup later on, but Gabriel doesn't make it into the centre back partnership this for this match for me. So it's another position he can play in, and look, he can be as well, much like Granit Xhaka, quite rash in the tackle. But if he's doing it close to the byline, I don't mind as much. It's when he gets rash towards our own box or when he's the last man. And then Bulgarian Gunnar, the same KT is back on, if not tomorrow, for next week. Yeah, he is a player who has sustained a lot of injuries, a lot of impact injuries. The type of player that he is, he won't go out and look after himself. So it's the responsibility of Mikel Arteta to look after him for us. That he is such an asset to this club, and for him to go out and sustain another injury that holds him out even longer, or aggravate an injury that holds him out even longer, it's just not worth the risk for me, especially in a two-legged tie. So yeah, no. But anyway, back to the point. Does Chukwueze frightened me against Granit Xhaka, yes, and that's absolutely why I wouldn't be playing him in that position tomorrow evening.
So based on that, Jared, we haven't seen Cedric, aka the entertainer, for a few weeks now, and I know that he is not a left-footed player, and he does potentially slow us down in our transition moving forward a little bit. But taking into consideration that by Ancelotti sending Richarlison against Xhaka, he was clearly targeted, right? And think what you want to think about Unai. He's not clueless, so I'm sure he's reviewing our tapes. He actually mentioned in his press conference that he still watches Arsenal games occasionally. What a man, what a fan he is. So would you could take into consideration playing Cedric there? Just even though it might slow us down a little bit offensively, it might just add that extra defense that we may need on that flank, if not Gabriel, of course.
Yeah, I like Cedric. I don't like Cedric in that spot, but I like him in that spot for this game over Granit Xhaka. In my predicted 11, that's who I have playing there. And more than anything, I agree with Owen that we really miss Xhaka when he's not in that midfield pivot with Thomas Partey. He gives us so much and adds so much to our game. I think it's imperative that for these big hopefully three Europa League games we have left, that he and Partey are the partnership in the middle. So for that reason alone, I don't like him at left back. I would assume either move Saka back there because we know he's got the pace, although we'd miss him in attack. So kind of the middle ground I found there to keep both of those guys in their preferred position where they're most effective, kind of the fallback would be to put Cedric in that spot. And I think he's serviceable, if you want to call it that. He's okay. He's very okay is the best I can say about him there. As far as Gabriel in that spot, like Owen said, I know he played there when he was younger. That's something I don't really want to see. If we're afraid that Xhaka lacks the pace to stay with Chukwueze over there, I think Gabriel would have the same problem. So that wouldn't be my go-to. So I guess just by default, Cedric is kind of my guy just because I can find a reason to not put everybody else there. So I'd slot him in over there. And then I guess we'll get to the lineups later. But also, like Owen, I don't have Gabriel in my partnership for the center halves either. So I think he'll be on the reserves for this game, and Cedric's my go-to for left back for now.
So while we're talking about the vulnerabilities on left back there, Owen, is a change of formation anything that might float your head on this one? Because for a couple of days now, I've been thinking, why not 3-4-3? And just go back. Gabriel could play as left-sided center back. Holding in the middle, and who's our other? Or am I missing somebody? Gabriel.
Pablo Mari.
Pablo Mari. There you go. Almost forgot about him. Or I did forget about him. Would you take into consideration doing a 3-4-3 with? I'm thinking about like maybe Saka left wing back with Pep in front of him. On the other side, you got Chambers or Cedric Bellerin. We don't know who's going to play on that right wing back. And Odegaard, who throughout his career, even though he's an attacking midfielder, he has played out wide, especially when he was in Real Sociedad. So is a change of formation something that you would entertain, or at this point in time, the system is what it is, and it's better just to move the pieces versus the actual formation?
See, problem has been a lack of consistency. And for me, part of the problem is chopping and changing of personnel and chopping and changing of formation in the early part of his tenure. This is a system that is relatively effective. I wouldn't say that systemically we go out and we lose games in terms of our formation being wrong or the opposition causing us problems by showing vulnerabilities through those formations. But I would say it's more the attitude and the implementation of some of the more fundamental sides of the game, the likes of pressing and positional awareness and stuff like that. So for me, the formation isn't an issue, and I think that we do have the personnel to fill that 4-3-3 formation, no problem. As you just mentioned there, Cedric, I know Jared mentioned about Gabriel's pace, but I think that he's more than capable with his pace. He doesn't look like he's moving very quick, but he is genuinely quite athletic. But to be honest, to see Jared's point with that, with Cedric there, because if there's one thing that I don't know very much about Villarreal, but I do know that when they have space, when they have time on the ball, they can be devastating. But when you put them under any sort of pressure, they can't buckle. There is fragilities there, especially at the back. So for me, look, I possibly Cedric, Gabriel, whoever it is, and Callum Chambers on the right, who I think has been absolutely outstanding since his return. I think that he's somebody that people had dead and buried long before, he had earned that title. So them two wing backs are going to be massive. So I think this is a massive decision for Mikel Arteta, who he deploys within that within those wing back roles, but because they're going to be so key to tactically beating Unai Emery and Villarreal in this match. And don't get it twisted as well, because I think that's something we often expect from these first-legged ties over 2 legs. So in the first leg we often expect, when you watch boxing, a lot of the time, the first round, the second round, the third round, it's a feeling out process. There isn't very much going on. But with the lack of momentum that we have going into this game, multiple losses coming off, draws that shouldn't be draws. We've had the kick to the teeth of the Super League and the owner stuff going on. There isn't a very good feeling around Arsenal at the minute. So for me, anything but a win is no good in this game. We need to go out and put on quite a convincing performance for Mikel Arteta, for the fans and for the players, and just to ease some pressure all around. But back to the left back thing again. That is going to be one of his biggest key. And somebody else that we haven't even mentioned as well is Bukayo Saka. If there's anybody versatile and have the natural attributes to fill that position, especially with his counterpart that will be playing in and around that position, it's Bukayo Saka. That would probably be the person, actually, just off the top of my head, that I would trust to sort of carry the mantle in that position.
Yeah, that's actually a great shout, considering that Odegaard seems to be fit and ready to play. We saw him get a few minutes in the Everton game. That, pretty much you could potentially play Odegaard down the middle, move Roll down to the left. Pepe covers on the right-hand side, Saka back at left back. So we do have options. Villarreal, in many ways, or the Spanish Arsenal at this point. They're kind of mid to high level table. They score in equal amounts as they concede. So they have one real threat, which is Moreno, he's top scorer. He has 20 goals this season, but after that, there's a massive fall. It's Bacuarca said, his striking partner, with only 9 goals. So if we manage to keep Moreno under control and just go out and attack, I think we have a pretty substantial opportunity to take this to them. So here's hoping. But Jared, one thing that we cannot get away from is Arteta versus Unai. We all know that there's still a big big portion of the fan base that has never accepted Arteta, that still feel that Unai left in a really wrong way, which is, I could understand completely to an extent, because I do think fans got a little out of hand with him. Do you think Unai Arteta, that the concept of our 2 managers, one manager replacing the other one, the other coming back, coaching against his old team, do you think this is something that could play a part in the both the managers and the player psyche? Or do you think this is strictly more fans doing what fans do, creating a little bit of drama?
Yeah, I think it's great for this game, just for commentators, podcasters, people online, people like us, because it does add just another layer of kind of intrigue to the game, and it does keep it interesting. As far as the teams, I don't really think it's going to have any impact. Both sides should be exceptionally motivated. Like you said, Villarreal this year's a mid-table team. I think they're sat 7th or 8th in La Liga, so their season's basically over there. So they're just like us. They're going to get nothing out of the league, and they're kind of putting all their eggs in the Europa League basket. So it's a big game for both. I don't think the opposition manager is really going to play a part for other than us who want to talk about the game and give it some extra excitement building up. But it's a big one. We know they're going to be prepared. We know Unai Emery knows how to do well in this competition. He's won it 3 times, made it to another final where he didn't have such a great time one other time, more recently, I believe. But I think Arteta is going to have our guys ready. Since the turn of the year, we've in general played pretty decent football. We just have the typical Arsenal letdowns that we've seen all year, where we'll play well and then shut off for 30 seconds and lose. So I think the key thing is just going to be Arteta getting everybody locked in to where we don't have those lapses for even small parts of the game, and that the energy is up throughout the entirety. And I think what's probably going to work for us in that regard is I think a lot of our younger guys are going to play, and they tend to be the guys who really bring the energy for the full 90 minutes over, unfortunately, some of our veteran players.
Speaking of the prospect of players making it to this game, and actually I want to get both of you guys' opinions on this, because in other multiple DM groups, everybody seems to be fairly split. So news broke today that Lacazette, Aubameyang, Luis, and Tierney all trained today. They were all out for different reasons, obviously. Alba, malaria, Lacazette injured, Tierney, Luis, even a bigger injury scare. But they're all back ahead of schedule. Would you be surprised to see any of them in the field, or would you be tempted to play any of them?
Would I be surprised to see any of them? No, because I think that's something that we have seen from Mikel Arteta. While I do have a lot of points to praise him on, something that I do have to criticise him on is his inexperience. And for me, making rash decisions with players like Kieran Tierney or Aubameyang, this is a big pressure game, our biggest game of the season. I know we're all probably sick of saying that, but at this point, it really is. This is sort of do or die for Arsenal and Arteta at the minute, and for me, something that I don't want to see from him is him making a selfish decision to try and give him a more likely outcome of a victory or a positive result at the expense of putting one of our most important players at risk. Now, if you were to ask me would I include any of them, probably the one that I would be most likely to risk probably would be Alexander Lacazette. Simply because he's been on good form. The striking position is somewhere where we are lacking. When you look at the difference from the drop off from, even though he's misfiring at the minute, of Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, Alexander Lacazette, and then you're down to Eddie Nketiah. It's a huge drop off. Also, he only has 1 year left on his deal, so he probably is quite likely to leave this summer. So if he was to, let's say, aggravate an injury and leave himself out for the rest of the season, it's probably not going to be that impactful in the long term, so he's probably the person I would most likely risk. In terms of the rest of them, like David Luiz for me has been arguably our most consistent defender all season. I would argue that Pablo Mari would probably take that title if he had been there for longer this season. But for me, it's just it's a bit too soon. We're talking about people having long layoffs. There's often time to bed back in. As we've seen from Kieran Tierney, he had come back from a sort of a bit of an injury, and he was only really starting to get back into his usual form right before he sustained the next injury. So for me, although their name might be bigger, and what we expect from them might be bigger, but the reality is that we often don't get those level of performances immediately. That's quite rare. So, to sum a point up, I don't think anybody really makes it in for me apart from Alexander Lacazette.
Yeah, I'll kind of jump in on what Owen said. I'm pretty much in agreement. I love Kieran Tierney as much as anybody who watches Arsenal. Is my favorite player on the squad. Love watching him play, and I absolutely don't want to see him tomorrow. I don't want him anywhere near the pitch. If we're going to have any success this season, we're going to need him for the final. And imagine if we play tomorrow, get a good result, and he gets re-injured, and he is out for the year. We've kind of eliminated him from the game where we might need him most. David Luiz, for me, his had a pretty good season, but regardless of his health, he's not. I like the partnership of Mari and Holding. It's probably the least exciting we have, but also the most effective. The odds of us keeping a clean sheet with those guys out there, at least on what we've seen so far this year, is significantly higher than any other partnership we have. So for that reason, I wouldn't put Luiz in. And I kind of went the other way on the strikers. I agree. We have to protect those guys where we can. But if they're both questionably fit, my choice was going to be to put Aubameyang in the starting 11. And I only say that because of late, I think Lacazette's been one of our more important players. We've played really well with him in there. I like what he brings with his hold-up play. So he's of the two, he's the one I was leaning towards wanting to protect more for potentially the second leg and final. So for that reason alone was kind of where I fell on that one, and I would go with Aubameyang tomorrow. But in my starting 11 of those four, Alba was the only one I had playing at all.
Can I ask a quick one for you, please?
Go for it.
Which goalkeeper do you play in this game?
We're going to come on to that one for sure. Jared, be my guest. You first, sir.
I'm still Leno. I know a lot of people don't like that after that ridiculous showing in the last game. And that one, it was just such, I feel like it's a bit of an anomaly. I mean, that was just so poor. If you were watching an under 12 game and saw a goalkeeper do that, you'd say he's underperforming. So to see it at, the Premier League level's laughable. But at the end of the day, looking at him objectively, I think Bernd Leno is clearly a better goalkeeper than Matty Ryan. So for that reason alone, I would stick with him. And I also think, and this should have nothing to do with Arteta's decision on on which one to play, but the switch is going to be bad for Arteta, because as soon as he puts Matty Ryan in and they put 3 past us on Thursday, the immediate reaction is going to be from the Arteta out people saying, this is another example of his inexperience. It's a knee-jerk reaction to one bad error, and now he's cost us the tie in the season. Now, that shouldn't play a role in his decision, but that's exactly where this is going to go. I mean, we're all around the Arsenal fan community enough to know that it doesn't take much to kind of get everybody riled up and in that direction. So I'd still play Leno because he's the best player. That's just kind of a side thought on what's going to potentially happen if he does make the switch and it doesn't go well.
I'm going to go with Ryan. And the Leno thing is not only just the mistake that he made during the Everton game. I personally think he's been looking a little shaky for a few weeks now, not just this specific. So I don't know what it is. Goalkeeper, and they're confident it could get hit or questioned by any chance by anything really. So what I'm seeing with Leno is he seems a little bit more nervous on the ball now when he has the ball on his feet. I used to just see him and I'm like, man, this guy's so cool, calm and composed. Doing chip passes over their strikers. And it used to almost piss me off. Like, dude, you're going to give me a heart attack. What are you doing? I don't see that anymore. As of late, I see him kicking it out wide a whole lot more. I don't know if that's because we had 2 back-to-back incidents where you could blame him or not blame him. There was like 50-50s. I think there was like one with, I think both of them with Xhaka, where, he passed from out to his defense and things got ruined and it led to goals. So overall, currently under current form, Leno, it seems shaky to me, and Ryan seems okay for me. We've only seen him twice, 3 times maybe, and so far so good. He's been class. I mean, I don't really count the Manchester City game because how could you really? I mean, they're Manchester City. We saw what they did to PSG today. They're a class act.
Saw what PSG did to themselves today. Do
themselves at a good point. Fair enough. Owen, if you could hear me, you are completely frozen, so I don't know if you want to chime out and chime in. So
no, I'm here. Can
there you are. You okay? Yeah. Now you are. You looked stoned there for a second, and I envy you because I haven't smoked anything lately. Here's a question from the chat for you, sir. Sir Aston Mac asks. Oh, he actually corrected right there. There you go. Question from Aston Mac: what could stand and Josh do to win back the trust?
Oh. That's a tough one, man. To be honest with you personally, I don't think they can. I think that they sold themselves down the river when they made such a massive decision to join that Super League without first even consulting look. If you ever need to know that your idea is a bad idea, it's when you have to do something in secrecy, because obviously, then the backlash that it's going to come with. Like, what did they expect? The people to be fucking delighted when this news came out? No, they knew what they were doing, and they chased the cash cow rather than the fundamentals of this football club. For me, in terms of what they could possibly do, a heavy amount of investment is I'd say probably a good start. and that's maybe not the top priority on a lot of people's list, but it is something. But I don't think we're going to get that. In fact, I think that our spending in the summer is probably likely to be heavily impacted to the fact that we're not going to be getting this money. I'm sure their entire business plan for the next 4, 5, 6, whatever, how many years was reliant on this massive income annually. So I actually think that we're not going to see as much spent in the summer as we maybe would like. Clear communication between the fans is another thing as well. The fact that Stan Kroenke hasn't even showed his fucking face to the Arsenal fan base after such an embarrassing thing. You know, I don't know about you lads over there, but we're being slagged off by Everton fans, by Leicester fans, by Aston Villa fans that I know. You know, the fan base is tarnished. Stan Kroenke isn't the one that has to walk about with an Arsenal shirt on him, you know, a few days a week and take the shit off the rest of the Premier League fans. So the fact that he hasn't even had the guile to come out and stand by and say, look, I've made a mistake, that tells you everything you need to know about him as a person. For me, the trust can't be won back. I don't think it can. And I think, I'm not sure whether any of you watched Mikel Arteta's press conference for this up and coming game. He was questioned quite a number of times about the owners, and he made the most political, slippery answers around whether he actually, you know, supports the ownership of the football club. And for me, it was massively apparent that he probably doesn't have much time for them. He probably doesn't think that they're suitable owners for a football club like Arsenal. So when you're starting to see these things slipping through, I mean, fucking Ian Wright, you know, not Mr. Arsenal, Tony Adams, but in terms of a poster boy for Arsenal Football Club, and he's essentially the Arsenal mascot, you know. And for him to come out and post Kroenke out tells you everything you need to know. These people, they're not trustworthy. They're not good people. They don't have the club's best interest at heart. And for me, the best thing they could do to win the trust of the fans back is to fucking accept the next offer for the club and leave.
Harsh, but fair. You know, I've heard, just amongst us, Stan hadn't made an appearance because he's growing that wicked mustache ever since the lockdown. It's going to be epic when you guys see it. Just trust me on this. Jared, Bulgarian Gooner, a.k.a. Sir Drago. What a man this guy is, man. He's an absolute pleasure to chat with, and he's been popping up on our open mics along with Aston Mack, and just a wonderful, wonderful guy to chat with. Going into this tie, how confident are you of us overtaking Villarreal?
You know, in general, I think looking at the teams objectively this year, and obviously I don't watch a ton of mid-table La Liga, I think we have on paper a good enough team to get a good result and move forward to the final. What's hampering us most right now is the guys up front. If we have either Aubameyang or Lacazette, I think we have a good enough squad. We should be able to get a good result. But we saw the last game with neither of them in. It really is a struggle to see us creating chances. And we're not a team that has, you know, guys outside of the striker position really contributing many goals. So I think that's going to be kind of the key, is if either one of our strikers can play. On that same front, I know we mentioned talking Saka potentially to left back. You know, he does offer something going forward and as a goal threat. I think especially if those guys are out, we're going to see him stay up front because we're going to need it. And I also think that's where we may see Emile Smith-Rowe in one of the forward positions, you know, in those forward four. The nice thing we have going is we do have a pretty versatile group of attackers, even with the strikers out between Pepe, Saka, Emile Smith-Rowe, Odegaard. You know, we've got some guys who can fill the spot. But goals are tough to come by. We don't produce a lot. So that's kind of my main fear, is whether or not we're going to be able to go and get goals tomorrow, especially being the away leg. You know, it's critical to go out there and put a couple past them. So that would be my main concern, is if we go out and get shut out tomorrow, we're really going to be up against it, you know, next week at the Emirates.
Yeah, side note, Owen, just based on what Jared just mentioned, it always slips my mind. For the last 3 days, I've been believing that we're going to play at the Emirates. Where do you, just random question on my behalf, where do you stand on that? Would you rather play at home first or away? Because I'm perfectly comfortable playing away first.
Yeah, well, to be honest with you, look, this is a very stupid and unusual reason, probably to like
From
these.
You?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, exactly. No, but my brother's a massive Liverpool fan, and ever since the Liverpool Istanbul win in 2005, I always love those sort of. I think it can become quite repetitive, and when the scenes are changed, when your back's against the wall and big comebacks are on, I always like those unusual settings for them. So for me, I do like the second leg to be away from home for some reason. I don't know what it is. I think it's the feeling of being the underdog. It sort of it adds to the excitement. I think, so that's why I always think like for example, if it was 2005 and you were a Liverpool fan, would it have felt as special if that was that night in Anfield? No, it's good because the setting as well. You're out of your comfort zone. It's a completely different place, and for me, that's, I don't know why, but I always like the second leg away.
Yeah, I agree. I would start off by saying the away goals rule in general, I find idiotic and I can't stand it. Yes. In a normal year, in a year when there's no fans in the stadiums, it's extra dumb and it really pisses me off. But to answer the question, I would definitely want the away leg second, simply like we saw with us last year against Olympiacos. If it does go to extra time, you've got the advantage in that you have more time to score an extra away goal and get a win. So based on nothing more than that, I would prefer to have the away leg second.
Fair enough. Yeah, I'm the only one here that likes playing at home blast, I guess. Yeah, no, it's an interesting question, but something that both of you guys brought up, fans. So I guess the home away thing has almost been rendered irrelevant slightly this whole season. So we'll see how that whole thing plays out. And to end the show, we're going to end our show with the starting lineup that we would ideally want to see, take in consideration the players that are 100% available and the ones that are potentially available. Oh, and I'll start off with you, brother.
Yeah, sweet. So I'm gonna go for obviously what I think, or not what I think Mikel Arteta is gonna pick, but if it was me, what I would pick. So I would start with Matty Ryan in goal. But I think you covered all the reasons, Mike. Your points were spot on. Callum Chambers has been fantastic, so him at right back. My centre back partnership would be Rob Holding and Pablo Mari. I think that in terms of a partnership out of the people available, that them two have probably made the best connection and are the most formidable centre backs that we have. Left back, I'm actually going to go Bukayo Saka, just for the reasons that I stated earlier, and his counterpart that he would be up against. My two at the base of midfield is Granit Xhaka and Thomas Partey, are two best midfielders available. Ahead of them in the number 10 position, I'm going to go for Martin Odegaard. I think that it's been a very, very long time at Arsenal since we have seen a player able to dictate a game, and for such a young player as well, to be able to carry the mantle in terms of, like, I look back and I would think it was Tom and Clive I was listening.
You want to jump in there, Jared? You want to start off with your starting lineup?
Yeah, I'll jump in on mine until we can get Owen back. In goal, we talked about this earlier. I went with Leno. I completely understand the argument for Ryan. If he puts him in there, I certainly won't have a problem with it. Right back, I've got Callum Chambers also. We've got a few options there, but I think he's played well and he's done good in that spot, so I'd like to keep him. Center back partnership, I kind of alluded to this earlier. I'm in agreement with Owen. I think Pablo Mari and Robbie Holding is the strongest pairing we have. They've done really well together, and especially playing Villarreal, who has a 20-goal scorer up front. Those two together, when you look at how much they limited Dominic Calvert-Lewin over the weekend, I mean, he was a non-factor. His only touches basically were in the hold-up play, coming back to the halfway line to touch it. I think he only had a couple, 2-3 touches in the box the whole game, so I like those two to kind of get the job done. Left back, we kind of talked about extensively earlier. I went with Cedric just as kind of a fill-in so we can have everybody else in their best position. My midfield pairing, Xhaka and Partey, I think that's pretty straightforward. That's the best midfield pivot we have. In the 10, I also have Martin Odegaard. Like all the reasons Owen was going into, I think he dictates the game really well from that spot and really is pivotal to our attack. And in front, I've got Emile Smith-Rowe left, Bukayo Saka on the right, And then assuming he's fit to play, I went ahead and put Aubameyang out front for tomorrow's game because I was a little worried about losing Lacazette to a hamstring long term.
Fair enough. Owen, you want to finish up your lineup, mate?
Yeah, Martin Odegaard. I was saying, the West Ham game sort of, I think, highlights exactly what Martin Odegaard is about. You know, there was a lot of questions over him when he originally came in on loan, whether he was mature enough, whether he, was developed enough to make such an impact. And I think he's answered every single one of those questions. For me, the difference in class, attacking class, when he's on the pitch versus when he's not on the pitch is night and day. So for me, he has to go in there in the number 10. On the left, I would agree with Jared, Emile Smith-Rowe, and I actually really like the connection that Emile Smith-Rowe and Martin Odegaard have. I think that they play off each other really, really well. And then on the right-hand side, I'm going to go with Nicola Pepe. I think that, especially in Europe, he has been extremely prolific, and I think that sometimes his form hasn't been fully rewarded by Mikel Arteta completely. And for me, I think he's earned the right to play in this game as well, especially with the rest of the team that I've picked. But I'll go back into Pepe in a second. So I'm going to have Alexander Lacazette playing up front. And what I meant by I'll go back into Nicola Pepe, the reason for that is because I think when you see Nicola Pepe struggle and when you see his per performance is highlighted, it's when Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang's on the pitch. And it's because I mentioned in a podcast quite a while ago, I think with the two of you, that you can afford to have one sort of weak link in your team. You can't afford to have two. And for me, Aubameyang and Nicola Pepe are weak links in terms of their defensive work rate. They're closing down, about structural stability. And I think that with the rest of those players that we have all picked, one thing that you can say that they all have is work rate. So I think that within this team, with the type of team that Villarreal are, I think that Nicola Pepe could thrive, and I'm actually tipping him to be the big performer in this game.
Very nice. Yeah, I love the starting four that you guys have, because I think I look at Villarreal, I look at a team that is weak defensively. They're a glass cannon. Like I said, they're the Spanish Arsenal. So my lineup is going to go like this. We're going to got Ryan at the goalkeeper. Chambo will continue being our right back. Holding and Gabriel partnership. They seem to be playing a lot of games together, and they're fairly solid. And I'm going to go with Cedric at left back. And it's because the way I look at it is we don't need a massive amount from our defenders in attack if we have the right players moving from the midfield forward. And I really do think that they don't pose that much of a threat. And if we could just isolate them, if Cedric could control Jacuzzi, I think we're going to be looking good. So after that, we got Partey and Xhaka, who undeniably are our best midfielder partnership at this point. I know that Xhaka splits a lot of opinions, but the reality is he is our second best midfielder by a country mile. So there's no comparison there. Odegaard through the middle, Smith-Rowe on the left, and I'm going to go Saka on the right-hand side. And I am going to go with Nketiah starting the game. And I simply think he will get more opportunities. I feel like he's slightly hard to judge him based on the Everton game because we created so little during that game. So I just see that with Saka, Rowe, and Odegaard behind him, it might potentially open up another window. Mostly, gentlemen, because I am absolutely paranoid of seeing one of Lacazette, Alba, Tierney, or Luis starting this game. So maybe depending on how the game's going, he plays the last 30 minutes. Although, sorry, Mikel doesn't do substitutions at minute 60. Sorry, he'll play the last 10, 15 minutes of the game, and we'll go from there. And can I just point out one thing that absolutely amazed me from all three of us? None of us started Martinelli. So
I love Martinelli. I just don't think we're going to see him in the starting lineup. Yeah, I just don't see Arteta doing it.
No. Jared and Owen are Martinelli out. That is what I'm going with because it suits my.
And Mike Herz is a cranky lover and a Super League lover.
Okay, One thing I've learned about this podcast is when we start attacking each other, that's when we should end the podcast. So, Owen, I would say plug your Twitter, but you want to tell the people, anything? Goodbye, at least.
Yeah, no, I don't. I normally say, where can you find you? I don't want you to find me. I don't know you people. Why would I want you to find me? I'm on Facebook. I'm on Facebook. I'll probably not accept you, but you can try to add me.
Okay, so don't look for Owen at all. Jared, do you want to be found?
Well, now I feel like a dick saying sure. Yeah. Yeah, you can find me on Twitter. It's Chicago Gooner. It's at JC_AFC, and occasionally popping up on most every Arsenal podcast out there.
Lovely stuff, gentlemen. Now I'm taking abuse for being a Dodgers fan. I'm telling you, I can't win in these live chats. So, my name is Mike Herz. I've been your host. You can find me at Mike Herz FC on Twitter if you want to continue abusing me for being a Dodger fan, a Kroenke in, and a Super League fan. Did I sum that all up? This has been the Gooners Podcast. Thank you so much for dropping by and listening. Come on, you Gooners.